Hello and welcome. Our special guest at the India Today Conclave pop-up is one of the world's foremost foreign affairs gurus. No matter where he is, Mumbai-born, Manhattan resident Fareed Zakaria always has a very close eye on what's happening in India. And as election fever peaks, I thought it will be very interesting to hear how Fareed Zakaria sees what's at stake for India in the global context in this election. Zakaria has a new book out, Age of Revolutions, Progress and Backlash from 1600 to the Present. Zakaria is calling this an age of revolutions, where he's essentially talking about four revolutions that are at play at the same time in economics, technology, identity, and geopolitics. So what I thought we would do to make this session really special is to get Fareed Zakaria to use the genius of his punditry to look at how these four revolutions are playing out in the Indian context, to tell you how what's at play globally applies to India and what may happen from here. Can we have a warm round of applause as we welcome to the India Today Conclave pop-up Fareed Zakaria. Fareed, welcome, and it's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Rahul. I'm thrilled to be here. I also think you are actually in my neighborhood. My home is across the street from the president, so I'm looking very fondly on this pop-up.
It's really nice to have you, and thank you for making time. How do you, Fareed, look at the Indian election from your perch? You're looking at what's happening globally. There are 60 plus elections. 1/3 of humanity goes to polls. How does the Indian election stand out in the global context? What's at stake here?
So in general, if you were to make some kind of a very broad generalization about those elections all over the world, the one theme that has been at work almost everywhere has been an anti-establishment wave. The people who tend to win are the people who say, I come from outside the elite. I come from outside this world of, kind of urban, educated, cosmopolitan guys and women who have been running things. So you look in Latin America, for example, last year, almost everyone who won came from outside that world and presented themselves as an outsider. There are a few places where the person who is the most interesting is trying to be both an insider and an outsider. And that is Modi's genius in a way, is that he is trying to present himself as both an insider and an outsider. He is, of course, the prime minister, of course, touting his achievements enormously, but at the same time, reminding you that he does not come from the gilded elite of India, that he is not, part of the Nehru Gandhi family, that he comes from the chaiwala background. There is a certain way in which he's trying to achieve both, and he's not the only one. In a way, Viktor Orban in Hungary does the same thing, and Trump, in his own way, does the same thing. But it's a very unusual skill to be able to both simultaneously be the insider and the outsider. And Modi is trying to play that game.
Most transformational leaders, when they were up for a third election, whether it's, say, a Tony Blair or a Margaret Thatcher in the United Kingdom, had a lot of turbulence. How do you look at the fact that despite being in power for 10 years now, Prime Minister Modi continues to have amongst the world's highest popularity for any leader? It's dipped just a bit, 2% it's fallen over the last few weeks, but it's still way higher, and it's the envy of all other leaders.
It is extraordinary, and it's partly, as I said, that's why I call it the genius of Modi. Modi is a very skilled political player. He is one of the most skilled politicians I've ever seen. And I think he has very skillfully managed his public perception. Now, he has been able to also marshal the resources of the government in an extraordinary fashion, in a way that is difficult to remember even Congress prime ministers at their peak doing. If you get a vaccine, you get the vaccine with Mr. Modi's photograph on it. If you get a benefit, you get it with his photograph on it. If you walk into a train station, you see a life-size cutout of him. The blanketing of the media with Modi as a personality, as opposed to the Congress party, is, as far as I can tell, new and unique in Indian history. And that has played a role. India, there is a very powerful unifying force that all these messages have. But again, I don't want to detract from what I think is the principal reason he has it, which is that he's a very skilled politician. And he does come from outside that gilded elite of India. Every Indian prime minister before him was, in some sense, part of an elite, either by birth or by education. You think of, the Gandhi Nehrus, but you even think of somebody like Narasimha Rao or Manmohan Singh. Manmohan Singh probably was born poorer than Modi, but by education moved up into the kind of urban cosmopolitan elite. And Modi comes from outside of that, which is, of course, where the majority of Indians come from. So there is something, there is a special quality to his relationship with the ordinary Indian.
So your book looks at revolutions in different parts of the world going back to 1600. So if I were to ask you to apply that lens to India in the current context, who are the parallel leaders who come up in your mind when you look at the dominance of Prime Minister Modi in the Indian political context and in Indian society at this moment? Who would be parallels who come to your mind, Fareed?
I think that when you look at somebody like Modi, what you're looking at is somebody who is trying to usher in, by his very person, a kind of fundamental transformation of the society. Whether you like it or not, Modi is trying to, in a sense, remake the Indian narrative, which is focused much more on a kind of Hinduism first, or, call it what you will, a Hindutva agenda. And in that sense, he does resemble, somebody like a Trump or a Bolsonaro. Erdogan is probably the closest analogy that I would say. Erdogan came to power believing that Turkey had been ruled too long by a kind of urban cosmopolitan elite, that he was going to provide a new narrative for Turkey, one much more infused with religion. And what Erdogan and Modi have in common is they're also in their own way modernizers. They also want to ride the wave of technology, of economics. They're not backward looking in that sense. They are more than willing to embrace the revolutions of the present that are transforming the country. They also want to engage in a political transformation that accompanies those, that gets rid of the old sources of identity, the old, if you will, kind of narrative, and put a new one in place. So it's simultaneously, it's in some ways a kind of forward-looking new narrative, but of course it in some ways harkens back to, I would argue, an imagined past, but in any event to some idea of, a purer India.
I now want to dip into some of what Fareed's written in his book, and I want to start with where you write about growing tribalism and the revenge of the tribe. How culture, class, tribalism is what makes people decide who they wish to vote for. Now, when you apply that, Fareed, in the Indian context, we've seen what's happened in the past 10 years, but you're also in your book trying to look into the future. Give everyone sitting here and watching you across the India Today network a sense of, the revenge of this tribe, the idea that we've been left out, which is why Prime Minister Modi is as popular as he is. How does this apply at the moment and going forward, Fareed?
Sure. Let me give you an example to make the point of the rise of culture and cultural identity and this, as you say, cultural sense of dispossession or marginalization. So Joe Biden currently has the lowest approval ratings of any president in American history. Ordinarily, people always believed that a strong economy meant a president had strong approval ratings. That's why, if you remember, the slogan of Bill Clinton's election campaign was, "It's the economy, stupid." And the truth is, Biden is presiding over possibly the strongest American economy in decades. Unemployment is basically at a 50-year low. Inequality, which was considered the big issue, has been falling now for 4 years. Manufacturing employment is up. Employment in every sector is up. Inflation is down to 3%. It's difficult to find a statistic that is not there. To give you a couple just to show you how powerfully the United States is doing in today's world. In 2008, the Eurozone economy and the American economy were the same size. Today, the American economy is 2 times the size of the Eurozone economy. If Great Britain, India's former colonizing power, were to join the United States as the 51st state of America, it would be the 51st poorest state in America. It ranks below Mississippi, which is the poorest American state, in per capita income. And yet, Biden has the lowest approval ratings of any president in American history. Why? Because we have entered an age of cultural politics where what matters is not so much economics and much more this sense of how do I define myself in today's world? Who am I? And in those criteria, there are a large number of people who feel that this world dazzling with technology, with strong economic growth, is leaving them behind, has left them behind. And that's why issues like immigration and what is so-called woke agenda have become so important. That is, it's the rise of this cultural politics. Now, in India, it applies, again, somewhat unevenly, because India is, of course, a much poorer country, and so is still moving up the economic chain. But you still have, as I say, this idea of the rise of the previously marginalized, the people who were seen as less central to the narrative, who now feel that in Modi they have their standard bearer. And that has been his appeal. The real challenge will be, in India, you still have to deliver economically, and Modi has done a lot, but there are many gaps, unemployment being probably the single biggest gap. And how will all this play in the Indian context is a little difficult to tell. One thing I'll say about the Indian, again, I'm watching it from outside, but his first election, there was a wave of change. There was a sense that people wanted change from the Congress coalition. The second one, of course, was consumed with nationalism and anti-Pakistani nationalism. I don't feel that there are those, this doesn't feel as strong in terms of a wave for Prime Minister Modi as those previous ones. If you were to have to characterize what is the wave that is going to propel Modi to 400 seats, I'm not sure what simple phrase I would use in the way I could for the first two. Change in the first one, anti-Pakistani Indian nationalism on the second one. I'm not sure what this one would be.
But Fareed, it's not just about how strong the government and Prime Minister Modi is, it's also about how strong the Indian opposition is. And given the current state of the opposition, and there are some senior voices from India's opposition with us in the audience, what are the lessons you think India's opposition can draw internationally from how opposition movements internationally are dealing with a similar situation? Because at this moment, they're up against a force which electorally they haven't been able to fight. In recent assembly elections in the Hindi heartland, there was anti-incumbency against the BJP in certain heartland states, and even then, the opposition couldn't find a way in a localized regional context to topple the BJP when the Prime Minister wasn't on the ticket. So what are the lessons you think India's opposition can learn from what's happening with the opposition internationally?
So first I'd say, remember, it's not always necessary to find one single party that can define itself as the opposition. If you think about India's post Rajiv Gandhi, it has mostly been coalition governments. It has mostly been a collection of parties that won. And maybe in a sense, India's diversity lends itself to that kind of coalition politics. Modi is the exception. Modi was able to nationalize the BJP. Even Vajpayee and Advani were not able to. Dalits never really voted for that version of the BJP. So Modi's, again, I give him credit. Modi's genius was to find a way to nationalize the BJP, either through alliances or by personal appeal to include the Dalit vote. And there was a certain amount of rather aggressive Hindutva in that too, where, you know, in effect what you're saying to the Hindus, majority, even lower caste Hindus, is, look, we're all in this together because we're not Muslims. You know, you can take pride in the fact that you may be a Dalit, but at least you're not a Muslim. There is a certain raw tribal politics being played there. But you know, your point is well taken. The thing that I think particularly the Congress has to learn to do is to better connect with that, you know, that Aam Aadmi, if I can coin a phrase. And they're not as good at that. I think they're better than people think. I think that there's always been a challenge for Congress to return to its grassroots strength. You know, in my opinion, one of the great tragedies in Indian history was, it was in 71 or 72 when Indira Gandhi suspends internal party elections in India, where the seats used to be given on the basis of a kind of bottom-up process, and then it became a top-down process where a court in Delhi was going to decide who got the parliamentary tickets, the legislative seats. It all became a top-down process. The most powerful parties are always those that have a bottom-up, a very strong, and Congress at its greatest always had these very powerful regional leaders, Y.B. Chavan, Kamraj, people like that. And I don't think you can truly rebuild the Congress into a national party without that process. I grant you that Modi has done it with the BJP as a single titular figure. But I don't think that path is available to the Congress. What the Congress should do is embrace its own past, where even under Nehru, there were very powerful regional leaders who had enormous strength in their states. And in a sense, you could look at that and say it was a kind of coalition. You know, they may have all called themselves Congress Party, but Kamraj was certainly somebody who was his own guy and was not going to be dictated to by Delhi. And so if it can embrace that kind of bottom-up grassroots strength, that's probably it also feels more in character with the nature of India.
The other thing you write about, Fareed, in your book is the disconnect between politics and economics. The fact that in the US, the economy is doing better than it has in a long time, and yet Joe Biden's popularity is the second lowest of all modern presidents. There are those in the opposition who will say that given how there is agrarian distress, growing youth unemployment, there should be greater discontent than what can be seen politically. The theory that could apply in the Indian context is even if all of this is true in terms of rural distress, the agrarian sector being badly off, it's about who voters think is best suited to help alleviate their concerns, where when they look at what's available for them politically, they end up potentially settling on the BJP and the Prime Minister because they think, okay, we have a problem, but he's the man who can settle it, and that's where the opposition struggles. Do you think this idea of there being a disconnect between politics and economics applies in the Indian context from your lens as well?
I think it applies, and I think you're right that it could sometimes help Modi, because there's a sense in which even if he didn't deliver on economics, he can deliver on these cultural issues that you raise up. And that's, to my mind, both possibly an effective game that the BJP plays. It's a dangerous one, because, look, the Southern whites used to play this game in America all the time, which is you would say to the Southern white working class, your lives may be terrible, your income may be low, but at least you're one step higher than blacks. That was the basis of the Southern, the old Southern Democrats who used to rule in the South. And in a way that strategy has been used in other places, and in India you can see that strategy being used, where you try and unify Hindus around the idea that they're not the Muslims. I think the danger here is, this ultimately is why Advani and Vajpayee also that version of Hindutva didn't work. I think Hinduism is very broad, diverse, and tolerant. I think you can kind of get people riled up for a while, all human beings, on the basis of negativity. But I don't think ultimately it works in India because India is a very broad, diverse society in which it has tolerated diversity for 5,000 years. And you're rubbing against the grain of that when you try and rile people up on the basis of these, one tribe disliking the other tribe. On competence, you can certainly make the case that Modi will be the guy to deliver. And as I say, he has promoted that image very effectively with some justification. I think with Modi, you always have to recognize that while he's practicing some of these arts of tribal politics, he is also, both politically and administratively, very competent.
I now want to come to the next revolution you write about in your book, and this is to do with geopolitics. And on that note, I just want to also tell you that someone you know well, Ian Bremmer at the Eurasia Group is here. We'll be hearing from him next, and it's very interesting that we've got these two top foreign policy voices, both giving us their independent perspectives on what's at play geopolitically. So you wanted to say a quick hello to Ian. Ian, welcome. I just want to tell our viewers what Fareed writes about. He basically talks about this phenomena of a rising power threatening to displace an established power, ultimately leading to war between them. And he talks about how over 500 years, Paul Kennedy, for example, looked at 16 cases of the rise and fall of great powers, out of which 12 led to wars. So in the current context, the possibility of war between China and the United States, and what, obviously from the lens of the audience sitting here, what that means for India. So let's just spend a moment on that, Fareed. The prospect of confrontation, open confrontation, leading to military confrontation between China and the United States. How do you see that?
So as you say, the historical pattern is what you described very accurately. From the time of Athens and Sparta, you have had this dynamic where rising power challenges the established power, and it leads to friction, it leads to tension, and in 12 out of 16 cases, it led to war. My own sense is that the United States and China, we may be lucky enough to get not a Cold War, but a cold peace. And why is that? Because the global economy is much more interconnected than it ever was. So during the Cold War, the US and the Soviets, best year of US-Soviet trade was $2 billion that year. US and China trade $2 billion almost every day. It's a completely different situation. Secondly, I think that the Chinese recognize that at the end of the day, the US and its allies remain very, very strong. I think that if you think about the statistics I mentioned, and you think about every leading industry in the world, the US still dominates. The top 10 technology companies in the world are all American. If you look at American demographics, they are the only rich country in the world that has strong demographics because of immigration. America is an energy powerhouse. It makes more oil than Saudi Arabia. It makes more natural gas than Qatar. China, it has bad demographics. It has no energy. It has to import all its energy. It is not dominating the technological space. So it's in a very different position. So we may luck out in getting a cold peace rather than a cold war. Though, of course, on something like Taiwan, things could go wrong very easily. Now, where does India fit into this? India looks like it's in the cat's bird seat. It's able to be wooed by both sides at some level. It's able to play so that it is both seen by the Americans as a friend and at the same time busily buys Russian oil at a discount and Russian weapons. And I think that gets India an enormous amount of freedom of maneuver. My own view is that India, at the end of the day, will want to be more solidly aligned with one of these camps, because the world is fracturing, and you are ending up in a technological two-zone world, and increasingly there will be a kind of economic two-zone world, with the Chinese dominating parts of the global south, other countries, and the Americans and Europeans having their own essentially zone. And I say the two sides will trade with each other in a cold peace. But India would benefit enormously if it were more solidly aligned with the West, with the free world, with the democratic world, and it would be able to reap enormous rewards technologically, in commercial terms, economically, but also culturally, if it was seen more solidly aligned in that way. I worry sometimes that this path India is on will leave it not, with enormous freedom of maneuver, which everyone thinks about, but will leave it stuck in a bit of a no man's land. Let's remember, to play that role of being the great freelancer with all the options in the world, you should be already an advanced industrial country. India's per capita GDP is 2,500, 2,800. It is the poorest country in the G20. It is a country that needs at least 9% growth to be able to break the back of poverty. And for all those reasons, it needs a much stronger alliance, a much stronger economic relationship with the Western world, with the centers of the most advanced technology in the world. And I fear for, what are we getting out of this multi-aligned policy? A little bit of nationalist pride, a little bit of strutting around, being able to say everyone is being nice to us, everyone is bowing down to us. But what are we missing? What we're missing is the opportunity to hitch our wagon to the fastest growing, most powerful, most technologically advanced country in the history of the world, which is offering that relationship to India on a platter.
Why are we better off if we hitch our bandwagon to America than we are right now? This is something that Dr. Jaishankar, and I've had an opportunity to speak to Prime Minister Modi as well about this. They feel very passionately about. They'll say, okay, this is Fareed Zakaria echoing Washington's voice. It is in India's national interest to do what works best for India. Why should we listen to Fareed Zakaria? How would we be better off if we did what you said?
Because of exactly what I just said. Because India needs America more than America needs India. I mean, that's why this is not Washington's view. Washington will be fine. With India, there's very little that India gives Washington. In any case, India is not going to veto a UN resolution that America wants, because it doesn't have the veto. In any case, India is not going to add in any significant way to the deterrent capacity that the US needs with regard to China, because that's largely a naval issue. And India does not have a powerful navy by any stretch. So the issue is, if India wants to modernize, if the fundamental goal, remember, this reminds me a lot of the non-aligned period, where, because of Nehruvian pride and this ideology that said we are morally superior to capitalism or communism, we're going to chart our own path. India decided to basically stay aloof. South Korea, Japan, Taiwan picked sides. India and South Korea had roughly the same per capita income in 1950. Actually, India's was a lot higher than South Korea's. Today, South Korea's per capita GDP is 35 times India's. So you tell me, was it worthwhile for South Korea to hitch its wagon to the fastest growing, most technologically advanced country in the world? Or was India's strategy of this Nehruvian aloofness and moral sanctimony, and Krishna Menon giving fancy speeches at the UN, what did that buy India? And I fear that we are in the same position. You will not get the full benefits of a comprehensive strategic relationship, economic, technological, and political, with the United States if you don't make a choice. If you want to play this game, of course you can. India's a big country. Even in the 50s, it was a big country. Just the sheer population and geography dictate that. But you're losing out. It's the opportunity cost that I'm talking about.
One of Prime Minister Modi's big poll planks is that India's prestige at the global high table has gone up substantially over the past 10 years. And that's something that a lot of voters seem to believe in and like as well. How do you see the next 5 years being for India, given all the geopolitical headwinds that are at play? The theory in India is that so far India has risen and there hasn't been a strong pushback internationally, that the level of pushback over the next 5 years could be much more than over the last 10. How do you see this, Fareed?
I don't think so. I think India is in a sweet spot. The rise of China is the fundamental geopolitical trend of our time. And the rise of China means there is a market for a large Asian country that is going to balance China in some way. And India is that large Asian country. So there is an enormous incentive for everyone to respect India, to try to have good relations with India. So I don't think that you're going to see that. Now, India could overplay its hand. But so far, to be fair to Prime Minister Modi, I don't think it has in that sense. An aggressive India, an India that tried to do something in Sri Lanka again, or, the kind of thing that produces pushback is generally, a much more aggressive foreign policy, defense policy. You look at China. In my opinion, Xi Jinping has been the worst foreign policy leader for China in 40 years, in 50, basically since Mao. He has triggered a series of balancing mechanisms in Japan, in India, in Vietnam, in Philippines, in Australia, and of course, most importantly, in the United States, against China. China was trying to attempt a peaceful rise. That was the phrase used by Hu Jintao, Xi Jinping's successor. India should try to take a lesson from that book and say, as we rise, our intention is to rise peacefully, to rise in a way that doesn't threaten other people. That is the glide path to success.
In your book, you write, Fareed, about the crests and troughs that globalization has been through. China registered 9% plus growth at a time when the tailwinds were in favor of globalization. Prime Minister Modi and the Indian government are trying to ensure India rises from number 5 in the global economic standings to number 3 at a time when there are headwinds blowing against the idea of globalization. Is that something that's here to stay? Because in the book you make the argument that this is just a period. There are times when countries are doubling down on nationalism and protectionism, and there are times when new generations seek to unshackle markets and trade. How far could that period be? How do you see this, Fareed?
Well, right now there's no question we're in a period of deglobalization in the sense that people are trying to find, special relationships, opt-outs, selective protectionism, industrial policy, and so it is harder. I think you're right. Now, what compounds the problem is India has never been very open to international trade. One of the reasons that India does not do as well in manufacturing is that manufacturing is very much now a global process. So people talk about how the iPhone is made in China. It's actually not made in China. It's made in 15 Asian countries and eventually assembled in China. And the reason it was so difficult for Apple to come to India was because India has very high tariffs on intermediate goods. So importing the component parts becomes very expensive. Now that has been solved, as far as I can tell, by giving Apple a bunch of special waivers. But that is not the path to really moving from 5% to 9%. The path would be for India to become more open to trade, allow more intermediate goods to come in at lower tariffs, then India can become a hub. I think it's a very sad reality that when you look at the degree of diversification away from China, in particularly advanced manufacturing, the Apple symbolism aside, India has gotten very little of it. The principal beneficiaries of the diversion from China have been Vietnam and Mexico. And what India should be trying to figure out is how can it take advantage of that? How can it move up the value chain? Unless it itself is more open to trade, it's not going to be able to do that. Yeah, it does face an atmosphere of not as permissive, but India could solve a lot of problems by just making itself a little bit more open to trade.
As you know, poll season is at its peak, and I want to draw you into the big political debate here, Fareed. So here's what it is. The likes of Praveen Chakravarti, P. Chidambaram, Jairam Ramesh say that there is an inevitability about India's rise. That this is, regardless of which government is at play, India will rise, will go from being number 5 to being number 3, regardless of whether Prime Minister Modi comes back to power or not. Then there are those like GVL Narasimha Rao and the others who you just heard who say, no, This is to do with political stability. This is to do with the fact that we're being able to get things done. Big projects are being executed. Infrastructure is being built. And India is on the move because of the fact that we have a strong leader. So Fareed, which one is it? Is there an inevitability to India's rise? Or do you think that it's very important that Prime Minister Modi and the BJP come back, because only then will we be able to move from 5 to 3?
Well, I agree with the second, which is it is not inevitable. You need good leadership, but I would not equate good leadership with strong leadership. Look at India's past. India has grown very strong, very strongly under periods of coalition government. After all, many of the reforms were initiated and implemented under coalition governments. Look at, again, South Korea or Taiwan. The two countries that have grown fastest in the world probably over the last 40 years have been South Korea and Taiwan. They did it in periods of messy democratic rule. They did not have some great strong man. So everyone who says that, oh, you need a strong man in order to get growth, tell me how South Korea went through the breakneck period of growth. Can you even name the strong man of South Korea for the last 40 years? Name the strong man of Taiwan for the last 40 years. It's a myth. What you need are good policies. But you do need policies. I agree with that part. It's not inevitable. People look at the demographics and say India will rise inevitably. Well, Africa has good demographics. Do you know what over the last decade, the average growth of per capita GDP in Africa has been over the last 10 years? The answer is zero. Zero. So you can have good demographics. If you don't have good policies, you will still lag behind.
So we've spent time discussing the most important election in the world from India's lens, which is our own election. But the moment you step outside India's borders, the most important election arguably is the election in the United States. And Fareed, at this moment, all polling data seems to suggest that Donald Trump is ahead of Joe Biden. Do you think Donald Trump can win? And if he does, what does that mean for India and the world?
Look, I don't want to avoid giving you a clear answer, but I'll explain to you why it's hard, Rahul. In overall terms, the election is a foregone conclusion. Joe Biden will win the election by over, I'm going to say, 7-8 million votes. In any other electoral system in the world, in any other democracy in the world, that would mean he would become president. But the United States has a unique democratic structure with the Electoral College, which means that the fact that Joe Biden will win the popular vote by at least 7 or 8 million votes will not translate. So then you get to the Electoral College and these 5 or 6 states that you have all heard about. And over there, to be honest, it is close to a statistical tie. Yes, Trump is leading, but he's leading in almost every state within the margin of error, which means statistically it's a tie and it's too hard to tell. My gut is if the election were held today, Trump would win. But I think that if you look not at polling, but at actual elections over the last 3 or 4 years, the Democrats have tended to do well in the end, maybe fueled by it seems to me like the two great issues in America's election right now are two cultural issues: immigration, which helps the right, and abortion, which helps the left. And in some sense, we're going to figure out which of the two brings out more voters, which converts more people in the center. And I'm not sure I can tell you confidently where it's going right now, but today, if you were to look at it, you're right. Trump has the edge.
Okay, so let's take some questions from those in the audience. I'll start with my colleague Saurav Majumdar, editor of Business Today. So if we can have a mic sent across to him, please.
Good evening, Mr. Zakaria. You mentioned...
It's Fareed.
Okay, good evening, Fareed. You mentioned in the context of China that India hasn't really benefited to the extent it should have from the, in terms of the manufacturing story. But of late, there have been some big projects which have come in terms of the announcement of semiconductor projects, for instance. Then the PLI scheme, which the government seems to suggest, and push in a bigger way. Do you think that these will make a difference? And how do you see that story playing out in the future?
It's a great question because I think that there is potential here, but I worry that we are going down a path that is not the right one. We're in a sense copying the Chinese strategy, which has not always been effective. So if you look at the semiconductor issue, so the Indians are now trying to get to become a part of the semiconductor supply chain. What countries are part of that supply chain? America, China, South Korea, Taiwan, principally Taiwan. These are all countries that are at least 4 to 20 times India's per capita GDP. So India is a very poor country, is trying to leapfrog to the top of this. We are not good at basic manufacturing yet. We're trying to become very good at advanced computer manufacturing. And in order to do that, the government is giving Micron Technology a subsidy that is equal to 160% of the total education budget of the government of India. Think about that. In other words, if you were to increase the government of India's education budget by 160%, that one subsidy to that one company, is that worth it? Or is it better to fundamentally retrain and uplift tens and tens of millions of Indians? I think it's the wrong path. I think it will be a very expensive path. I think the cost overruns are likely to be great. And at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is modernize and lift up the whole country, not give a handout to one company.
Okay, we'll take the next question from Praveen Chakravarti. Praveen Chakravarti is a senior leader of the Congress party, has headed the Big Data Analytics Cell, chairman of the Professionals Congress Wing. So Praveen, go for it.
Thank you, Rahul, and good evening or good morning, Fareed, whatever time zone you're in. I want to kind of push you a little bit on the strong case that you made that India should hitch its wagon unabashedly with the United States. Why? What does India get in return? And sitting where we are, there is a sense that America is actually a declining power. You mentioned Micron. So I could flip that around and say, why did Micron even want that subsidy? What has America done? And today there is a headline story that says foreign investment from negative, declined, and it's the lowest since 2006. So what has India got in return, especially when there is this view that it is perhaps a power in decline?
So let's start with the perception of the American power in decline, which is a perception largely, in my opinion, promulgated by the Chinese. The East is rising and the West is declining. So the United States is currently 25% of global GDP. It's 4% of the world's population. It is 25% of global GDP. Do you know what that number was in 1980 at the heyday of Ronald Reagan's America? 25%. The United States has been able to maintain its global share of GDP over 50 years with no decline. As I say, if you look at the top 10 technology companies in the world, in 1989, 5 were Japanese, 4 were American, 1 was European. Today, 10 out of 10 are American. It's not even that. If you look at the market cap of those companies, of the 7 biggest technology companies in the world, all American, they are larger than the total market capitalization of the countries of Germany, France, Britain, Italy, and Canada put together. Apple alone has a market cap that is larger than the entire country of Germany. So the perception of decline seems to me to be odd when placed against these realities. I mentioned the energy reality. The US is now the energy superpower of the world. If you think about the demographics, so it's very difficult to square that reality with the economic data. And then you add to it that when you want to think about America, you want to think about it with its strongest allies. The Europeans, the Japanese, Australia, Canada, Singapore, and you put all that together and it's about 68% of global GDP. All the advanced technology in the world coming out of there. So what India would gain is a close, tight relationship with that part of the world, with that center of technology, of economics, of commerce, of culture. And let me put it to you this way, there is also a very deep cultural symbiosis between India and America. You can see that in the relation, in the role of Indian Americans. These are two great democracies. These are two diverse countries. These are two societies. These are two places where society is powerful, as you know, not just the state. You would have thousands of points of connection between Indian businesses and American businesses, Indian NGOs and American NGOs. You know, I think that it would create a much richer, more powerful, more sophisticated country that would gain enormously. And if you want to talk about how to rise up the ladder in the world, it seems to me to be part of the most technologically advanced part of the world and the most open and free. Look, India's destiny, in my opinion, is deeply democratic. It's too diverse a country to be ruled any other way. And so to find strength in that diversity by aligning itself with the other great diverse democracy in the world, I think would be an enormous benefit. And the United States would much prefer to have India as one of its closest economic, technological, strategic allies than Vietnam or something like that. As I say, there is a natural affinity. Think about the period when Manmohan Singh offered up on a platter. When George Bush offered up on a platter the nuclear deal to Manmohan Singh. That was an indication that the United States was willing to go not the extra mile, but the extra 10 miles to make that deal happen. Why? Because there is a natural affinity that Americans feel. It's a society-to-society relationship that tends to be much stronger than the state-to-state alliances that one makes. If you think about the US and Britain, that is a society-to-society relationship. You think of US and Saudi Arabia, that's a state-to-state relationship. Which is stronger, which is deeper. It's when the two societies really see each other as allies, which I believe India and America do.
Two questions before we wrap up. The first from Kali Puri, Executive Editor-in-Chief of the India Today Group. Kali.
Hi, Fareed. Thank you so much for Conclave pop-up. It's a real pleasure. I wanted to ask you something about what you said earlier about Trump and Biden being statistically tied for the next election. What difference would it make to India if Trump came to power or Biden came to power? Who's better for India, according to you?
It's a great question. I think both will be pro-India. I don't think that there will be much difference. I think, honestly, there has been a bipartisan strategic decision, and as I said, by America's natural proclivities toward India, ever since the Clinton administration. Basically, the Clinton administration found a way over the course of its administration, trial and error. First, it put sanctions on because of the nuclear explosion, but after that, essentially Clinton came to India and tried to make up, and then you had the Bush administration with the nuclear deal, and you had Obama, made several overtures and would constantly say that Manmohan Singh was his favorite foreign leader in the world, and of course, since then. So you've had a consistent policy of an America that has been reaching out to India and trying to find ways to strengthen those ties. I think that will continue. And if you want to be cold-blooded about it, as I say, the rise of China makes that strategically inevitable. The question to me more is, what will be the fundamental outlook of a Biden administration versus a Trump administration? And I think Trump fundamentally reflects a kind of return of American isolationism. He reflects an America that says, why the hell are we in the world? It's costly, it's messy, all these foreigners take advantage of us. Let's retreat to our fortress America. If anyone messes with us, we'll beat them up, but we'll retreat to our fortress. That's the Trump mentality. He also very strongly believes in protectionism and high tariff walls and all that kind of thing. So I think from a broader orientation, you are better off in a world in which the traditional American internationalism prevails, because it's a world that will be more open, that will be more rule-based, that will be more free, that will be a world in which America is more engaged, and particularly for India's biggest strategic concern, which is the rise of China, I think you will have a more effective counter to the rise of China with a more internationalist America, an America that's more than willing to play its part in, whether it's guaranteeing the security of European countries, guaranteeing the security of Asian countries, that sense that the United States understands that its role in stabilizing the world is key to avoiding a descent into some kind of new great power tension or great power war. So I think it's on that broader dimension. But they'll all come to America, to India at Holi, and they'll all wear white kurtas, and you let their white kurtas get messed up because they all want to court India.
Given you have kind of said that the Democrats will be better for us, I want to ask you on a lighter note, can this statistical tie be on one side or the other, or the statistical tie be broken by Taylor Swift?
Well, in a way, it tells you how close the election is, and it tells you again how cultural issues play an enormous part. But I think that at the end of the day, while Americans think about all these sort of trivial issues, the elections do tend to be fought and won on these much broader kinds of issues that I'm describing. Even though there are 60% of the democratic world public going to elections, honestly, this is the pivotal election. This is the election on which the shape of the world will be determined, because you really do have on the one side somebody who fundamentally doesn't get America's role in the world and wants to draw back, and another side that wants to be more engaged and more involved. So I think the stakes for everybody are high. We'll be fine. I mean, I have always thought that if Trump were elected, America will be fine. America has very strong democratic institutions, and they will take a beating with the second Trump administration, because he's fundamentally a kind of illiberal figure, and fundamentally in many ways a kind of quasi-authoritarian figure. But we have, think about the last time around. When he challenged the election, you had 55 court decisions that went against him, including a majority of those judges who ruled against him were Republican, many of them appointed by Trump, and they still ruled against him. His own attorney general refused to go along with him. His own vice president refused to go along with him. State governments refused to go along with him. So the United States has very strong democratic checks and balances. I think, by the way, one thing India could learn from that is our states need to be stronger. Indian states need to be a little bit given more capacity and more power to be part of the democratic mix. But what I worry about is the international sphere, because there the American president has almost no checks and balances. There the president can do almost anything he wants. And that's the role, that's the realm in which, with Trump, you never know, because he's really the world's greatest narcissist. He's the greatest egomaniac the world has ever seen. So he might decide that something looks good for him. I mean, who would have guessed that this is a guy who will fall in love with Kim Jong-un of North Korea? But he did, because he got into his head that this would win him the Nobel Peace Prize. I don't know who gave him that impression, but so we'll be in for a roller coaster ride and many surprises. The question is, do you want to take the chance and buy that ticket?
If that happens, you can just come back to Mumbai, Fareed. And I have at
As
least
I said, my apartment is across the street.
Yeah, and we've got some great food here as well. So I have at least 12 more questions which people are requesting, but we're out of time. And I want to thank Fareed Zakaria for joining us. There's some bits of his book we couldn't get into, but that's also when Fareed will say, just read my book for the rest of it. So thank you very much, Fareed Zakaria. Absolute pleasure having you with us at this India Today Conclave pop-up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rahul. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much.